Rust Haven Station smelled like failure and recycled air that had given up pretending to be fresh sometime around the 3rd century of continuous operation. Maya Torres navigated the lower market sections with her hand near her sidearm, and her expectations set to, "Everyone here will rob you if given sufficient opportunity." The parts dealer she'd been haggling with for 20 minutes was insisting that reactor coils with military serial numbers filed off were definitely legitimate surplus and not at all stolen from a Navy depot. "Look," Maya said, examining a coil that had scorch marks suggesting its previous owner had experienced a very bad day. "I'm not saying these fell off a truck. I'm saying they fell off a truck that was probably being chased by federal authorities when it exploded." The dealer, a Kithran whose scales shifted through colors that Maya's translation implant suggested meant offended innocence, gestured expansively. "You question my reputation. I have been honest businessman for many years in this station." "You've been a criminal for many years in a station where that's the primary job description," Maya corrected. But she was already pulling out her credit chip because the coils were actually decent quality, and her ship needed them more than she needed moral high ground about provenance. "Fine, 60 credits, and if these explode during FTL, I'm coming back to have a very pointed conversation about quality control." The transaction completed, just as shouting echoed from deeper in the market. Maya's instinct was to ignore it. Rust Haven averaged 3 violent incidents per hour, and getting involved in other people's problems was how independent captains ended up dead in creative ways. But curiosity, which had gotten Maya into more trouble than impulse control ever managed, made her glance toward the commotion. Auction block, technically illegal in civilized space, which meant thriving business in the fringe territories where laws were decorative suggestions. Maya had seen them before, usually gave them wide berth because there was exactly nothing she could do about institutional horrors running on economics she couldn't fix. Except this time the crowd was laughing. Maya moved closer, reactor coils forgotten in her pack, drawn by the kind of wrongness that made her pattern recognition scream. The auction block held a young woman who looked almost human, same basic configuration, bilateral symmetry, appropriate number of limbs. But her skin shifted between silver and shadow like living metal, her hair moved with liquid mercury fluidity, and her eyes held depths that suggested sapience far beyond her apparent circumstances. Those eyes were empty now. Defeated, she didn't even look at the crowd anymore. 12 credits, the auctioneer was saying, his tone suggesting he was embarrassed to name such a pittance. "Surely someone will offer 12 credits. She's healthy, she's compliant, she's..." "Useless," someone in the crowd finished. "Can't even speak properly, probably brain damaged from whatever colony raid produced her." Maya looked at the price display, 12 standard credits. The cost of a decent meal. Less than she just paid for potentially explosive reactor coils. The woman on the block stood motionless, having apparently learned that resistance was pointless and dignity was a luxury slaves couldn't afford. Something in Maya's chest did the thing it always did when confronted with mathematics that made morality look stupid. The thing her first mate James called Tor's terminal condition of giving a shit in situations where shit-giving is financially inadvisable. Her hand went up before rational thought could intervene. 12 credits, Maya heard herself say. The auctioneer looked almost relieved to end the humiliation. Sold to the human freighter captain who apparently has 12 credits to waste on damaged goods. The crowd dispersed, already forgetting the transaction. In a galaxy of constant tragedies, one more slave changing hands for pocket change wasn't worth remembering. Maya approached the block where the woman, her property now, legally speaking, which made Maya's skin crawl, stood waiting with the patience of someone who'd learned waiting was the only safe option. "Come on," Maya said quietly. "Let's get you out of here." The woman followed without question, without hope, without any indication she understood that something had just changed. Maya led her through Rust Haven's corridors, past dealers selling weapons that probably violated 6 treaties and food that might violate more, back toward the docking bay, where the joyful venture waited with its patched hull and determination to keep flying despite physics suggesting otherwise. "I'm Maya," she offered, because the silence felt wrong. "Captain of that extremely mediocre freighter we're approaching, and before you worry, I'm not actually in the market for slaves. Plan is to drop you at the nearest refugee center, where actual qualified people can help with reintegration and finding wherever you came from." The woman spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonics that made Maya's translation implant struggle. "Sira, my name is Sira, or that's what they called me. I don't remember anything before." Maya's 12-credit receipt burned in her pocket like evidence of either the best or worst decision she'd made this month, and the month was still young. The joyful venture had seen better decades, possibly better centuries. The freighter had started life as a mid-range cargo hauler back when Maya's grandparents were young, and had since accumulated enough repairs, patches, and improvised solutions that her original manufacturers would probably weep. Maya loved her anyway, the way you love things that refuse to quit despite overwhelming evidence they should. Sira stopped at the cargo bay entrance, staring at the space like she'd never seen a ship before. Maybe she hadn't, depending on how long she'd been in captivity. "It's not much," Maya said, defensive about her ship in ways she wasn't defensive about most things. "But it's paid for and it flies and it's gotten me through some very inadvisable situations." "It's beautiful," Sira said quietly, and Maya looked at her to see if that was sarcasm but found only genuine wonder. James appeared from engineering, took one look at Sira, then turned to Maya with an expression suggesting he just added another item to his running list of Tor's decisions that will eventually kill us all. "Please tell me you didn't buy another person," James said. "I rescued another person," Maya corrected. "There's a meaningful distinction. The meaningful distinction is usually about 12 hours before we're fleeing from whoever you rescued them from." But James was already pulling out the spare quarters access codes, because for all his complaining he'd never actually stopped Maya from doing the right stupid thing. "Sira, is it? First rule of the joyful venture. If the captain says run, you run. Second rule, if something's sparking, don't touch it. Third rule, the protein bars labeled emergency rations are from before the war and we're not sure which war, so avoid those unless you're genuinely dying." Their engineer, a lumenic named Kel whose communication happened through bioluminescent patterns, emerged from the reactor room and immediately flashed alarm colors at Sira's presence. Complicated patterns that Maya's translator couldn't fully parse but which seemed to convey something between warning and recognition. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, but Kel just kept flashing, patterns getting more agitated. Sira watched the light display with curiosity, the first real emotion Maya had seen from her beyond defeated acceptance. "He's saying I feel wrong, like I'm something pretending to be something else." She tilted her head. "But he doesn't know what I'm pretending to be." "You speak Lumenic?" James asked, surprised. "I speak 17 languages," Sira said absently, still watching Kel's patterns. "My captors found it useful. I was expensive to feed but cheap to maintain if I could translate." She said it matter-of-factly, describing her commodification like someone discussing weather. Maya showed her to the spare quarters, explained the basics of ship life, and tried not to think about the fact that she just acquired a person for less than she spent on maintenance supplies. "You're not property," Maya said firmly. "The paperwork might say otherwise, but morally, ethically, you're free to leave whenever we reach a station with proper refugee services." Sira looked around the small cabin like it was a palace. "And until then? Until then your crew, I guess. Unpaid crew because I already spent your salary buying you, but crew." Maya was making this up as she went, operating on instinct, and the vague principle that treating people like commodities was wrong even when galactic economics said otherwise. "Get some rest. We're leaving Rust Haven in an hour because staying longer than necessary in places like this is how you end up dead or worse. Back in the cockpit, Maya ran standard departure protocols while James handled the navigation calculations. Her fingers moved automatically through pre-flight checks, muscle memory from thousands of departures, but her mind kept returning to Sierra's empty eyes and 12-credit price tag. "You going to run her biometrics?" James asked, not looking up from his calculations. "Should I? 12 credits is suspicious. Either she's worthless or whoever was selling her had no idea what they had. Both options seem worth investigating before we jump to FTL with a mystery passenger." Maya pulled up the identification protocols, standard procedure for anyone coming aboard. Fingerprints, retinal scan, genetic markers, the basic identifiers that help track refugees, reunite families, or occasionally identify criminals trying to flee authorities. She expected nothing, or maybe a missing person report from some colony raid. The system locked her out immediately. Not "no match found." Not "insufficient data." The identification system literally denied her access, displaying security warnings Maya had never seen in 8 years of running freight. Her console started receiving encrypted communications from sources that shouldn't know the joyful venture existed. "James," Maya said slowly, "remember when you said my rescues usually lead to trouble?" "Vividly, why?" "I think I just bought someone worth significantly more than 12 credits." The first encrypted message resolved into readable standard. Sender identified as Celestial Traverse Empire Intelligence Division, and Maya felt her stomach drop somewhere around her knees. The message was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Captain Torres, you have purchased an asset of extreme strategic value. Please maintain current position and await contact. Compensation for recovery will be generous. Refusal will be unfortunate." Maya looked at the spare quarters where Sierra was probably experiencing her first moment of safety in however long she'd been enslaved. Then at the message from an empire that apparently considered her 12-credit purchase an asset of extreme strategic value. "We're going to need better weapons," Maya said. "We're going to need a miracle," James corrected. The Celestial Traverse Empire's intelligence briefing arrived 6 hours later, encrypted so heavily that Maya's ship computer gave up trying to categorize the security protocols and just displayed it with a digital shrug. Maya read it 3 times, then made James read it twice, then seriously considered whether alcoholism might be a viable career change. "So just to summarize," James said, his voice very carefully neutral, "our 12-credit passenger is actually Serafina Kai Traverse, missing heir to one of the galaxy's 3 most powerful empires, kidnapped 20 years ago in a succession plot, and her disappearance has caused political chaos that's still destabilizing entire sectors." "That's the summary, yes," Maya confirmed, staring at the intelligence file that included Sierra's childhood photos. Same liquid mercury hair, same profound eyes, but smaller and smiling in ways the woman in their spare quarters had forgotten how to do. "And her ransom value is—" James pulled up the financial assessment, made a sound that might have been laughing or crying or both. "Her ransom value could purchase solar systems, plural, multiple solar systems." The file mentions that, yes. "And her genetic markers unlock technology vaults containing weapons and defensive systems that could shift the entire galactic power balance." Also mentioned, "And we bought her for 12 credits." "I'm aware of the financial discrepancy, James." Kel flashed patterns from engineering that Maya's translator converted to something like, "We are all going to die because Captain Torres has a conscience, and the universe punishes that." The Empire's offer sat in Maya's message queue, impossible to ignore. "Return Serafina, receive compensation sufficient to retire comfortably for several lifetimes, receive imperial protection from anyone who might object to the transaction, receive gratitude of an empire that could make future freight routes significantly more profitable. The math was simple. The ethics were complicated. Maya walked to the spare quarters, found Sira sitting on the bunk and staring at the wall with that same defeated patience. "We need to talk," Maya said. Sira looked up, and Maya wondered if she'd already guessed. If whatever instinct had kept her alive through 20 years of captivity had warned her that 12 credits was too cheap, that someone would come looking, that freedom was never as simple as a random freighter captain's impulse purchase. "Your name isn't Sira," Maya said, pulling up the intelligence file on her portable display. "Or it is, but it's short for Serafina. Serafina Kai Traverse. You're the missing heir to the Celestial Traverse Empire. You were kidnapped as a child, and your captors either never realized who they had or were too stupid to capitalize on it before selling you for pocket change." Sira looked at the file, at her own childhood face, at the genetic verification data proving her identity beyond any possible doubt. Her expression didn't change. No shock, no excitement, nothing that suggested this information meant anything beyond more ways to be used by people with resources. "So someone important wants me back," she said flatly. "What's my value? What did your 12 credits actually purchase?" Maya showed her the financial assessment, watched Sira process numbers that could buy solar systems with the same empty patience she'd shown on the auction block. "The Empire wants you returned immediately. They're offering me a reward that would make my great-great-grandchildren obscenely wealthy. They're also making clear that your return isn't optional. You're too politically valuable for personal preference to matter." "So I traded slavers for an empire," Sira said. "Different masters, same captivity." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Maya admitted. "Legally, I own you. The purchase was legitimate under fringe territory law, and property rights transfer regardless of the property's actual value. But morally, ethically, that paperwork is garbage and you should have choice in what happens next." "Choice?" Sira said the word like it was foreign language. "What choice do I have? If I refuse to return, the Empire takes me anyway. If I return, I'm used for political stability I don't remember being prepared for. Either way, what I want is irrelevant." "What do you want?" Maya asked. The question seemed to break something. Sira laughed, sharp and bitter. "I don't know. I was 7 when they took me. I don't remember being royalty. I don't remember having a throne or family or purpose beyond surviving each day. The Empire wants Serafina Kai Traverse, but she doesn't exist anymore. I'm just Sira, the translator slave who got sold for 12 credits because her owners thought she was brain damaged." Maya sat on the bunk opposite, trying to figure out what her grandmother would have done in this situation. Her grandmother had been a freight captain too, had taught Maya that sometimes the right thing was financially stupid, and you did it anyway because being poor with a conscience beat being rich without one. "Here's what I'm thinking," Maya said. "The Empire needs you back to resolve succession crises. Multiple factions are probably already maneuvering to either ransom you or kill you to maintain current power structures. And I legally own someone whose freedom I bought for 12 credits, which creates a very stupid constitutional situation if we're creative about it." "Creative how?" "You return to the Empire. You do the genetic verification, unlock the technology vaults, resolve whatever political chaos your existence creates. But you do it as my legal property, which means any decision about your future goes through me, and I'm a freighter captain who bought your freedom rather than your servitude." Maya pulled up the purchase documentation. "It's stupid. It's probably legally questionable, but it means the Empire gets their heir back, and you retain autonomy through the most ridiculous loophole in galactic history." Sira stared at her like she'd suggested flying directly into a star. "You'd refuse their reward to keep legal claim on me. Why?" "Because 12 credits was too cheap a price for anyone's bondage," Maya said. "And because every other option treats you like a commodity rather than a person. At least this way you're a commodity who gets to make choices. The Celestial Traverse, Empire's diplomatic vessel arrived at their coordinates, with the kind of military precision that made Maya's patched freighter look like a child's toy. The ship was beautiful in the way that extreme wealth produced: smooth lines, perfect symmetry, weapons systems that could probably vaporize the joyful venture without the targeting computer breaking a sweat. "I hate everything about this," James muttered, watching the diplomatic vessels approach Vector. "We're about to negotiate with an empire while flying a ship held together with spite and improvised welding." "That's the human advantage," Maya said, checking their defensive systems, which amounted to run away very fast and hope they miss. "They have technology and resources. We have audacity and a legal receipt for 12 credits. Sierra stood in the cargo bay, wearing clothes Maya had scrounged from storage, still looking more like a freed slave than a missing heir. The genetic verification had taken 3 hours and involved technology Maya didn't understand, but the results were absolute. Serafina Kai Traverse, confirmed through quantum-encoded markers that couldn't be faked, biological signatures proving her identity regardless of her memories. The Empire's representatives materialized via transport technology that made Maya's cargo bay look like a museum exhibit. 3 Celestials in formal diplomatic regalia, their skin shifting through colors that suggested emotional states Maya couldn't read, their eyes carrying the weight of authority backed by system-spanning power. "Captain Tors," the lead diplomat said, his standard carrying harmonics that suggested he was used to being obeyed without question. "We appreciate your assistance in recovering our missing heir. The reward has been prepared, and will handle Serafina's transportation and reintegration." "About that," Maya said, and pulled up the purchase documentation on her display. "I legally own Serafina Kai Traverse, purchased through legitimate fringe territory transaction for 12 standard credits. Property rights transfer regardless of the property's value, which means any decision about her future requires my consent as legal owner." The diplomat's colors shifted through patterns that probably meant, "Are you seriously trying this?" "Captain, you cannot possibly intend to claim ownership of our empress." "I intend to honor the terms of my purchase," Maya corrected, "which was her freedom, not her servitude. Serafina will return to your empire to fulfill her political obligations, but she does so retaining legal autonomy through my claim of ownership, which means the empire gets their heir back and she gets choice in how that return proceeds." "This is absurd. We could simply take her." "You could," Maya agreed, "but that would violate property rights treaties your empire signed, which would create legal complications in your succession crisis that you probably don't need. Or you could accept that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and the missing heir you've searched for 20 years gets found by a freighter captain who bought her freedom for the price of lunch." Sierra stepped forward, her posture carrying echoes of royal bearing that 20 years of slavery hadn't completely erased. "I'll return to the Celestial Traverse Empire," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was agreeing to. "I'll undergo whatever training is necessary to fulfill the political role I was apparently born for. I'll help resolve the succession crisis and unlock the technology vaults, and do whatever else my genetic markers make possible." She looked at the diplomats with eyes that had learned to survive impossible situations. "But I do it as Captain Tor's legal property, which means I retain autonomy through the most ridiculous constitutional loophole in galactic history. Accept those terms, or spend another 20 years searching for an heir you can control absolutely." The diplomatic vessel's command staff probably had heated discussions about this development. The communications took 6 hours, involved consultations with legal experts across multiple systems, and eventually produced acceptance, because the Empire needed Sierra's genetic markers more than they needed absolute authority over her choices. Maya refused most of the reward, took enough to repair the joyful venture properly, establish a trust fund ensuring Sierra's financial independence regardless of imperial politics, and cover the bribes necessary to legitimize the ownership paperwork across multiple legal jurisdictions. The rest she sent back with a note saying that 12 credits had been sufficient payment for doing the right thing. 3 months later, Maya was running cargo through the traverse sectors when her communication system received an encrypted message from an address that took her ship's computer 5 minutes to verify. The message was brief. Captain Tors, your 12-credit investment is doing well. I've resolved the succession crisis, opened the technology vaults, and started implementing reforms that will reshape imperial policy regarding personal autonomy. The Council of Elders is very confused about constitutional law involving property rights and royal succession, which brings me enormous satisfaction. Also, I'm technically still your legal property, which means I can veto imperial decisions by claiming my owner didn't approve. They hate this. I enjoy their frustration. Thank you for buying my freedom for less than you paid for reactor coils. Your investment, Serafina. Maya smiled, filed the message in her personal archives next to the 12-credit receipt, and plotted course for her next delivery. Somewhere in the celestial Traverse Empire, a missing heir was learning to rule while legally owned by a freighter captain who decided 12 credits was too cheap a price for anyone's bondage. The math still didn't make sense, but sometimes conscience won anyway.